Children at Risk, and we're talking with Mike Miles, the superintendent of the Houston Independent School District in Texas. Mike, our school rankings just came out. Hey, thank you very much for being here, by the way, Mike.
Yeah, no, happy to be here.
Yeah. Our school rankings just came out, and all over the state, we're sort of, we're able to see some of these bright spots that are going on. And a number of them in the Houston area that we're seeing school districts doing significantly better. And one of those is the Houston Independent School District. And I wanted to ask you, is there a secret sauce for you? And I think I know the answer that there's the secret sauce is usually just following the evidence. But for you, tell me a little bit about what you think has been sort of the key ingredient or ingredients to making sure that the schools in the Houston Independent School District are doing so extraordinarily well, at least according to the data, which I think means that's how they're doing.
Yeah, sure. And it's not just this last year, it's the year before as well. And so taking over 2 years, the growth has been incredible for our students, and the increase in proficiency for both reading and math across the board. And just so your readers or your listeners understand, we went from 93 A and B schools to 197. That's an increase of over 100 A and B schools. And we went from 121 DNF campuses to 16 D campuses, no F campuses
Yeah.
in just 2 years. So, what's the secret sauce? Um, it's not a secret sauce. We had to change the barbecue. We had to change the system. And so
Yeah.
I tell people that it's whole scale systemic reform. That's the magic, if you will. And secret sauce, magic, those terms all sound like it's almost a hope or a wish or accidental, when really it's very purposeful change
Yeah.
in the system. I
And
can I can explain more if you want, but
no, I think that's good. When you think about, when you're talking to superintendents who are doing turnarounds in other districts, and they say, Mike, what are some of the key ingredients? And they may not make it that simple, but when you think about sort of those key ingredients for you, I always talk about you have to start with a superintendent who wants to change and who's willing to be activist to really make some big changes. But obviously we have that in HISD. But beyond that, good principals, good teachers, and then what are the things that you really have to make sure that are happening?
yes, and so on the operational level, not
Yeah,
maybe the fundamental principles. I'm going to repeat, Bob, that it's about the fundamental principles first. It's the notion of you have to have autonomy, but with accountability. It's the notion that um, you build a culture where it is how we operate here. It's not a lot of choices. It's a choice to come to the district, and then we learn how we operate. It's the fundamental principle of tying compensation to how uh, people perform or the achievement outcomes, and many things like that. It's even changing the how we think about pace and change. It's not one thing at a time. It's not go slow to go fast. These are fundamentally different principles in our profession. A whole scale systemic reform is a different principle. It's we don't do one thing well at a time. We do a whole bunch of things at one time. So, with that said, operationally, though, my colleagues want to know, operationally, what, how do these underlying principle changes manifest itself, and what can you do operationally? So the biggest operational thing is uh, focusing on the quality of instruction and doing that throughout the entire system. And so we have one playbook on what quality instruction looks like. The entire district, 273 schools, can define the quality of instruction in the same way. And then What are the strategies? What are the actions that teachers have to do and principals have to do in order to have high quality instruction? And then how do you measure high quality instruction? Is it calibrated? Do you calibrate, you ensure that your principals and your other leaders are calibrated to the high quality instruction? Is it part of the evaluation system? How do you train to ensure that the quality of instruction and these strategies are pervasive throughout and being used? Um, then, is are people rewarded for it? Are people removed if they can't uh, teach with high quality instruction? And so forth and so on. Because all of it is connected, as you can see, and we have made sure that the entire system works and focuses on high quality instruction.
I've heard a lot of people talk about how expensive this is, right, to do what you're doing, Mike. And my immediate reaction is always, well, listen, if this is what it takes to make it work, we these are the things we have to do. But how do you answer people when they say, are we going to be able to keep paying for this, to keep these results up down the road?
So, we got no additional money in the first 2 years, right? There was no increase in the basic allotment
Right.
in the first 2 years, and only this year, the third year of our transformation, do we get some money from the state. Very happy to have it, by the way,
Yep.
not complaining. Um, and also, we were just like most districts strapped with recurrent expenses from the ESSER dollars. In other words, COVID relief money was used in a way that was not good and put into recurrent expenses. So that's actually a deficit spending by doing so. So we were in a worse financial position than we ordinarily would be. And we're going to be able to sustain what we're doing um, for the long into the future, unless there's a decrease in funding from the state or normal sources. But if it just maintains where it is, we're going to be fine. And so, what I think you framed it just right, meaning you have to prioritize. If this is what's important, if this is what it takes to get student outcomes, then that's what you have to do, and that means tough choices. Bob, the news is all about the choices we made, and without any context about, well, you can't do everything. If you really want to focus on the quality of instruction and raise student outcomes, and you want to pay teachers better, if you want to put your highest performing teachers in your lowest performing schools with an incentive or pay for performance model or bonus, then that money has to come from somewhere. And if you're not getting any money from the state, where's it coming from? So we cut a lot of central office positions, and we made some choices that are the right ones for our kids, while interest groups may not feel the same way.
Yeah. When you think about the long term, Mike, Uh, you know, as I look around the state and districts that have turned themselves around, not enough of them, obviously, but still, you see these districts that are doing significantly better because they had a superintendent that came in. You sometimes see that the next superintendent does something differently because they want to make a name for themselves, and the results change. What is your hope? Like when and if you move on, what's your hope in terms of making sure that these results sort of stick? I mean, we saw good results under Terry Greer, and then we sort of lost those results. You know, when you left Dallas, Huss actually kept your program, and he
Yeah.
had great results. So, what are you hoping to see when you move on?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's really pertinent because we're in the third year right now of the intervention, and the intervention most likely will end at the end of the fourth year, and then a transition period will start. So
Right.
that question you just asked is more and more on people's minds, including mine. And you mentioned one of the things that you mentioned an example of how I hope things will happen here in Houston. In other words, one way to make sure reform sticks is to make sure that it's successful, that it works, and that there's a new status quo bias. In other words, a new set of people tied to that reform effort. So in Dallas, the pay for performance um, has been going on, I think, 12, 13 years now for teachers. And it was very controversial when it was passed. And maybe at the beginning, there were some people who wanted to turn it around, change it back. But in the last 8 years or so, I don't think anybody's even tried or thought about getting rid of the pay for performance in Dallas, because now you have 60% of the teachers who are proficient or higher. They get higher pay. Many of them have been there for years now. They're making a lot more money than their peers in neighboring districts, and they're having success. So if you try to get rid of pay for performance now in Dallas, you're going to have to, anger a whole bunch of teachers who are doing well by that system. And by the way, the system's getting results for kids, so why would the board, you know, want to end that?
Right.
And
Right.
it's been research based and proven. It's not just TEA's numbers, but the National Bureau of Economic Research in March of 2023 put out a paper on Dallas's pay for performance, and there's no question from a really good researchers that it has contributed to student achievement growth over time. So I'm hoping the same thing here. I think, for example, NES, the new education system, for your listeners, that's the 130 schools that are going through whole scale systemic reform. I believe that model is going to continue to be successful, and will in just 2 or 3 years will be so successful, and we'll have a whole bunch of teachers and principals and communities that are finding that success, that a new board might be loath to turn back the clock on it. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
It's interesting. We don't know what a new board is going to will loathe to be,
Yeah, that's right.
it's a very interesting deal, isn't it?
Yeah.
When one of the things that I get asked a lot, especially after the school rankings, is, what is the silver bullet? And I go back to something you mentioned earlier, which is it's not one thing at a time, it's a bunch of things at a time. And especially when we're looking at schools that serve low-income families, right? You almost have to do a bunch of things at the same time and make sure they're all effective for the recipe to really work. And we're seeing it work in a lot of HISD schools. But one of the key ingredients that we have seen over the years is that the importance of pre-K and high quality early education. One of the things that Commissioner Morath really loves, right? And how have you seen that have an impact in HISD? And HISD was one of their early adopters, right, of high quality pre-K. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, your preamble there is also right. There is no silver bullet per se, right? In fact, the number one problem in American public education system over the last 20 years is this notion of incremental piecemeal reform. And so we seem to focus on one thing and try to do that well, and that hasn't worked. So your preamble where you say, yeah, we did a whole bunch of things all at once is absolutely right. To pre-K, also very important. We actually haven't done that well. It takes a lot to do pre-K well. You have to have the space, you have to have the right program, you have to have teachers who are well trained in pre-K. Pre-K can quickly turn into daycare if you're not careful.
That's right.
And so you have to have all these things put together. And we've had a demographic shift in the city and in the nation, by the way, but we just don't have as many um, kids in early childhood as we did just 10 years ago. But um, we definitely have to continue to improve our pre-K. We've had several programs to try to do that, and I think over time, it takes a while, but I think over time it'll bear fruit. One of the things we know in the profession is that kids from more well-resourced families have pre-K, really believe in pre-K and they send their kids to pre-K, and less resource areas or families challenged by poverty don't often do that, or not as frequently as well-resourced parents. So we definitely have to keep moving in that area.
Yeah. Uh, One of the other things I really wanted to ask you, Superintendent Miles, and this is something we're seeing across the state, is that uh, there's no direction from the Department of Education anymore around emergent bilinguals. And such a large population of the state of Texas are children of immigrants, immigrants themselves, children who come in with needing to learn English. That's been tough on districts all across the state. Talk about sort of your perspective on immigrant students, emergent bilingual students in the Houston Independent School District.
Yeah, it's been a battle and controversy in the profession for some time, and one of the key discussion points is bilingual versus dual language. The research is pretty clear that dual language is the way to go and not bilingual.
Yeah.
And so you'll recall when I got here, we ended bilingual and started dual language. And bilingual is where the student is placed with a teacher who speaks Spanish, and the student is allowed, and the teacher teaches in Spanish, and and incorporates English, of course, but it's predominantly assisted with Spanish, and that has shown that kids in that kind of program stay in Spanish a lot longer and don't exit the Spanish speaking programs until much later, even after middle school. So dual language is where you have 50% or as near to 50% of the courses in Spanish and 50% in English. And when you're in English, you have to speak English and the teacher has to speak English. And so we moved to dual language. And by the way, that's had a good effect. Our achievement gaps with our Hispanic students has closed tremendously, not closed, narrowed tremendously, and will continue to go in that direction.
And do you think, I just got off an interview with the Dallas Morning News. They were talking about this issue, and it seems to me that what we're going to see, even without direction from the Department of Education, when superintendents like yourself, like Superintendent Elizalde in Dallas, when they see that this is what you need to do to make sure kids are successful, they're going to do it without any direction. Is that sort of how you see it happening in Texas? I mean, it might be harder at small districts, but for districts that have a large portion of emergent bilingual, they'll do whatever it takes.
Yeah, I think most superintendents, especially with ones with large emergent bilingual populations, our job is to educate every kid who comes in the door. And we're going to look at the science, we're going to look at data, we're going to use programs and practices to improve the students. We want them to read at grade level, and we want them to read English at grade level, and that's the job. And so we will use whatever programs makes the most sense. We actually don't need a lot of direction from the Department of Education. As you can see, what we're doing in Houston, we are working on narrowing the achievement gap, regardless of whatever direction there is. I mean, the good thing is in Texas, the charge is to pass the STAR exam, and that means getting kids to read, write, and do math at grade level. And I have not been given any directions other than do well on the state accountability scores so that we can get out of intervention.
One of the things, one or two more questions, Mike, and then we'll call it a day.
Sure.
Um, One of the things that we saw across the state is that there are more and more magnet schools sort of popping up all over the place. But one of the changes that we're seeing, positive change, is that many districts are really sending a lot more and figuring out a way for low-income kids coming from low-income families, to be at those magnet schools. And this last year, Dallas did an extraordinary job in terms of the proportion of those economically diverse kids going into those schools. Is that something you see changing at HISD? Because, in many ways, magnets are always we have some of the best schools in the country in HISD in terms of some of those magnets, DeBakey, Carnegie, so forth. But they're not always as diverse as maybe you and I would like them to be. Is that something that we see changing over time? And granted, we need to have parents who say, "Hey, I want my kids to be here as well."
Yeah, so we HISD has always had a strong choice
Yeah.
program, um, but some of those choices weren't as strong as others. And you just mentioned some of the best schools in the nation that are in Houston, and we're proud of those schools, happy about those schools. But we need choice programs uh, beyond those schools. We need other choice schools that have high academic quality and lower achievement gaps. So, one thing that can be disguised in choice is you have a population of kids who are doing well, and so you have an A or B on your star exam, and yet you have a 40% achievement gap, and that has also been some source of consternation in the district where we are not going to ignore achievement gaps. We're going to address those. So the direct answer is yes. We need to continue to have choice in Houston. Um, I've always been a fan of parental choice. I ran a network of charter schools. My sense is that all schools, every school, needs to have great, educators and and provide all kids with a great education. If that's magnet, if it's traditional public, if it's charter, I'm a little agnostic to that. My charge in Houston is I have 273 schools, and that's I'm focused on those schools, not trying to make them private or charter or anything else. But as an educator, a long-time educator, I think every kid needs a great education, and choice is one way to help with that.
Yeah. And one of the sort of the points of information that I know you know is that some people will point to some of the schools in New York City, Einstein and Hunter College, these high schools that are really good, or Boston Latin. But those are selective public schools, right? You still have to take tests to get in there, and they're not very diverse, certainly not very diverse economically, right? And it's to Houston's credit and to Texas's credit, a lot of our high performing magnet schools are much more diverse than some of these others around the country. So pretty
Yeah,
interesting.
and that's the case in Houston, and that's one of the stronger points I think, is to have a bunch of choices that are choices for low income kids as well as high income kids.
Um, One other question, and then I want to go to sort of a fun question. But, when people are paying attention to Houston and they're thinking, how do we make sure? And one of the things that we saw in our rankings is that the number of schools across the state of Texas that are doing very well with low income kids is growing, right? So we're moving in the right direction. But there's still too many kids that are not reading and doing math at grade level across the state of Texas. And if we're to change the whole system wholesale, and someone says, Superintendent Miles, what's your recommendation for how do we change schools? Uh, what are some of the things that you say? Well, these are the things that as a community, as a state, as a country, we have to prioritize. What are a couple of things that you say around that?
So I think Texas is actually moving in the right direction as a state. I think policy wise, you have to have clear accountability. I'm sorry, our profession has gone away from the A word, but if you want high performance across the state or across districts, then you have to have some level of accountability. This notion of, you know, we don't want A through F ratings. We don't want to know whether our kids can read at grade level. It's just ridiculous. And so if you don't like the star, find some other test then, but you still have to hold yourselves accountable. And then you have to have focus on the quality of instruction. It has to be measured. It has to be assessed. And, unfortunately, and this is, I don't say this in a mean way. It's just we need effective teachers. We need to give good professional development, but not everybody can teach. And we need to have systems in place that remove ineffective teachers or encourages them out. You phrase it the way you want to phrase it, but um, rewards high performers and disincentivizes or removes our poor performing teachers. It is a tough profession. Teaching is an honorable and noble profession. And when we don't hold ourselves accountable or don't have standards or expectations for teachers, then then we actually lower the profession, and you get this comment that those who can't do teach, and that just drives me crazy. I challenge them to come to HISD and see if they can teach. And then the last thing is, um, we have lowered expectations across the board for students. Uh, for a number of reasons. Some are well-meaning and well-intended. After COVID, the kids need time to regroup, become more resilient, or whatever it is. But we need to keep our expectations high for all kids. And you can see in Houston, we're becoming a proof point in that we've raised expectations for kids and they've met them. We've raised expectations for teachers and the teachers have met them, and for principals. And so it's like that movie, I think it's Stand and Deliver with Jaime Escalante, where he says to Miss Molina, the students will rise to the level of expectation, Miss Molina. And I say the same thing.
Yeah. And the research backs you up on that, right? That whole culture
That's
of
right.
expectations is a key thing.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah. And thanks very much for the work that you and all your team are doing, serving our children in Houston. And thanks for being with me here today, talking a little bit about our schools.
Well, thank you, Bob. Thanks you and Children at Risk for elevating what teachers and schools are doing. It's a wonderful thing that outside organizations are trying to help out in this way.
Very good. All right. Hey, have a nice Thanksgiving.
All right. Thanks, sir.
All right. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.